Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Sami from the Biostatistics Learning Group, and welcome to another session here. Um, in this session, we're going to talk about an interesting um, theme or topics, um, which is secondary data analysis. And what we mean by secondary data analysis is that we analyze data and we use those data for our research that are really available and done by others, and they're made publicly available. So we're going to talk about methodology. We're going to talk about how to get started with them, how to manage the data sets, and then in creating using short form of scales, analyzing survey data with complex sampling designs, missing data in secondary data analysis, innovative methods within the context of secondary data, and using secondary data in psychological research, the use of secondary data in adult development and aging research, and using secondary data to test questions, secondary data analysis, and some other topics. So we've sometimes joked that there is no good reason to collect new data, given the wealth of existing data sets that can be used to answer important research questions. These existing resources are often longitudinal and usually have sample sizes that are larger than most sample sizes typically found in psychological research. Unfortunately, our enthusiasm for the analysis of secondary data sets, such as the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent Health, uh, in the British Household Panel Study, the General Social Survey, the German Socio-Economic Panel Study, and Monitoring the Future, is not always widely shared by our colleagues. We have encountered a few psychologists who dismiss the importance of studies from these datasets. Nonetheless, the analysis of secondary datasets is common in allied fields such as sociology, economics, and the practice is gaining acceptance in psychology. One potential barrier to greater acceptance of secondary data analysis, however, is that methodological training of many psychologists does not introduce them to this approach. The overarching purpose of this book is to fill this gap by providing an accessible introduction to secondary data analysis using the term secondary data analysis largely to refers to the existing national studies like AdHealth, PHBS, and MTF. However, we also use the term more loosely to refer to archives of studies or of existing data that are available to researchers who were not involved in the original data acquisition. Specifically, we hope that this volume provides readers with an introduction to the research possibilities that can be realized through the analysis of existing data and provide psychologists with a set of accessible primers that can help them begin their secondary data analysis. This book is designed to serve for further development of methodological skills and is presented an exhaustive compendium that sorry compendium that covers all of the issues. To facilitate further learning, the author presented a list of recommended readings at the end of each chapter. So why should we bother ourselves to learn about secondary data analysis? We're extremely enthusiastic about the potential for secondary data analysis to advance psychological science. However, we recognize that there are several issues that researchers should consider when thinking about secondary data analysis. Indeed, it's reasonable to ask whether a researcher should take on the challenge of analyzing existing data. The effective analysis of existing resources is deceptively time consuming and requires some degree of quantitative sophistication. It's possible to underestimate the time, effort, and analytical acumen required to use the existing data set. And for this reason, we do not recommend secondary data analysis to researchers who are not well versed in multivariate analysis and basic issues of psychological measurement. More broadly, we can identify several advantages and disadvantages of secondary data analysis. We encourage readers to carefully consider these issues. Before undertaking any secondary data analysis project, researchers who undertake these analyses should do so with a clear sense of the pros and cons of this approach. The most significant advantage is that the data have already been collected. This, of course, has the potential to save quite a bit of time in a research project because the PI does not need to design a new study and collect a new set of data. But more importantly, the types of data that are typically archived tend to be higher quality than could be obtained by individual researchers. Many existing data uh, are often longitudinal and they're typically having large sample sizes obtained using elaborate sampling plans. Thus, these resources can be used to generate estimates that are representative of larger or large population of interest. High school seniors in the US. Many of these resources are free or available at very low cost to qualified researchers. Thus, learning how to analyze secondary data sets can provide individual researchers with the raw material to make important contributions to the scientific literature using data sets with impressive level of external validity. This advantage is the primary reason we advocate secondary data analysis. A second advantage is that the analysis of secondary data sets encourages an open source approach to the science. Researchers using the same resource should be able to replicate findings using similar analyses. This fact encourages careful reporting of analysis and reasoned justification for all analytic decisions, explaining why certain covariates are included in a given model. Moreover, researchers who might wish to test alternative explanations can use the same resources to evaluate competing models. Thus, we believe that the analysis of secondary data sets encourages transparency, which in turn help facilitates scientific progress. So it should certainly help researchers develop good habits such as fastidious record keeping and careful attention to detail. Despite these notable advantages, there are also several disadvantages associated with secondary data analysis. The first and primary disadvantage is the flip side of the major advantage. The data have already been collected. The user of an existing resource may not have all of the information about the data collection procedures or important details about problems that occur during data collection. And more importantly, there is no guarantee that any existing data set will be useful for addressing the particular research question of primary interest to a given researcher. We want to stress the perspective that high quality research should proceed first and foremost from an important question, an ideally interesting question that is informed by theoretical concerns or glaring gaps in knowledge. Good research is motivated by great questions, and this holds for all form of research. The purpose of the analyzing data is to refine the scientific understanding of the world and to develop the theories by testing empirical hypotheses. The second disadvantage is that there is a significant investment of time and energy required to learn any particular existing data set. These startup costs may become a central concern because of the risk that someone else will pursuing answers to the same research question. There is a real possibility that new research might be scooped by someone using the same data set that the researcher has chosen to analyze. So they have to be quick, right, to publish that. Otherwise, the other person who's scooped, like they would publish it and uh, get the credit for it. So we'll continue in the next session, and I hope this topic is really enjoyable by you, my listeners.